continuously working on this riverfront from my graduation project of BArch. While doing my BArch, the focus was more on the architectural development or the physical development around the banks. After the post graduation of doing landscape with the focus of environmental landscape from CEPT, the point of view changed, or it accommodated the natural perspective as well, and hence it became a conjunctive approach towards looking this river Godavari as a man-made environment and a natural environment. Further down the line, while I started working on my doctoral project, the focus was more on the region of River Godavari and not only the city specific of River Godavari. And hence the scope expanded to make me myself understand about the other important natural features such as the geology and the geomorphology, which become very important when we speak about a basin of any river as such. So, with this academic background, I would like to start my presentation today to all of you people. This speaks and discusses about the riverfront in an urban scenario, and hence the riparian zones in an urban scenario. Okay, so I'll start with my presentation. Yes, are you able to see the slides, the presentation?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. So that I wanted to ask you one thing, that we need to make this session interactive, or it can go uninterrupted to a certain point, I mean, till the end of this presentation.
Interactive would be a great idea, ma'am. I think. And,
Okay.
and yeah, we have all these participants, so we can like ask them. Uh, yeah, interactive would be leads to better learning. So I would recommend that.
Yeah, at some points I would like to know something that I'm talking about, whether the participants are able to relate. That is my intention, so that this presentation is received in a correct manner. That is the whole point, where I would like to ask and interact with the participants. Okay, yeah. So, Riparian restoration is the theme of the workshop that all of you people are undergoing, and which comes with a prefix, that is the cultural riparian restoration. So, when we speak about cultural riparian, it intends and it brings along with it the intervention of man, or the association of man, or the relation of man with this context of nature, or this setting of nature, that is the riverine zone of a river. Well, River Godavari, you must have known a little bit about it, that it is one of the major rivers which flows through the Deccan Trap formations of the Indian peninsula. The other major river system that flows through the Deccan Trap is the Krishna River. Godavari River is measures around 1400 kilometers, followed by River Krishna, which also originates in the Western Ghats. These Western Ghats are also called as the Sahyadri Mountains in Maharashtra, Karnataka, and Kerala. And these mountain ranges give rise to these two major river systems, that is the Godavari River and the Krishna River. Both these rivers go and meet the Bay of Bengal and have a huge estuarian landscape over there wherever they meet the Bay of Bengal. To be specific, River Godavari goes and meets the Bay of Bengal at Rajamundry. So it traverses in four states of India, that is Maharashtra, Andhra Pradesh, Telangana, and then part of it in Tamil Nadu. Part of it flows through the state of Chhattisgarh as well. And it has around six sub-basins which contribute to make this Godavari basin of India. It arises in the mountain range called as Trimbakeshwar, which is there in Nasik. Here you can see that Nasik is located on the origin of river Godavari, and Trimbakeshwar is just around 20 kilometers from the city of Nasik. So this is a basic orientation to locate all of you people, if you are from varied regions of India, to understand how does the river origin, uh, what is the river origin in the country of India. It is the city of Nasik and the hill range of Trimbakeshwar where it gets originated and starts flowing through the Deccan Trap of India. Coming down to a smaller context, as you can see over here, this is the Arabian Sea or the western coast of India. These are the mountain ranges, Sahyadri mountain ranges. The start of mountain ranges is somewhere in the state of Gujarat, then followed by Maharashtra. And Nasik and Trimbakeshwar hill range is the northernmost part of this Sahyadri hill range. As you can see over here, this is the city of Nasik, and this is how you travel down to Mumbai. So geographically, it is around 200 kilometers from Mumbai over here, 200 kilometers from Pune over here, and this is the natural setting of the highest elevations from which these major river systems start developing. So Godavari originates over from this smaller hill range that is called as the Trimbakeshwar. Basically, it is a basin which is surrounded by the Satmala mountains over here, which come down and continue to form the Ajanta and Ellora ranges over here in the Aurangabad region. So historically, it is attributed that Nashik and Aurangabad or the Ajanta Ellora region were the most prosperous regions in this western part of Maharashtra, the northwestern part of Maharashtra. They were a flourishing culture in the Satavahana dynasty, and it was a prosperous trade route through which the entire northern India from Ujjain to Indore to Mathura to Delhi, they got connected to the seaports on the western side. So this is a brief understanding about how Nashik and the region of Godavari are have contributed to the historical development of man over here in this context. This is important because we are trying to understand the riparian zones with respect to the culture. And all of you know that culture is not a happening which happens overnight or in a period of a day or 15 days or a year or so. It is a process which gets developed over a period of at least hundreds of years. And that is why Nashik needs to be understood first in its cultural context. Godavari needs to be understood in its cultural context along with the natural settings. One of the famous Buddhist caves over here, which are there in the mountain regions of Nashik, is called as the Pandulena caves, Pandavlena, which were carved out, and they are Buddhist caves carved out during the Satvahana dynasty. As you can see, this is the average elevation range of all the peaks which are surrounding the region of Godavari, and these are the mountain ranges which are responsible for the development of this watershed of river Godavari. Coming down to a still smaller scale, now where we look at specifically to the hill range of Trimbakeshwar out here, and then the formulation of this watershed over here in this region, and the city of Nasik, which has got developed over here. The development of Gangapur Dam in this region is a major feature which has changed the morphology or the water ecology of River Godavari. Prior to the development of Gangapur Dam over here, the river is not as a non-perennial river. It is not a river which flows throughout the 12 months. It is a seasonal river depending on the monsoon and the rainfall, and hence it is called as the rain-fed river in the Deccan Plateau, similar to the river Krishna. Along with the rainfall and of being a rain-fed river, there is a small amount of contribution which comes from the groundwater also, which makes the river system effective in this region. So as you can see this over here, this is the mountain range which gives rise to this watershed. This is the river course. These are the other smaller tributaries which come up from the hill ranges over here. The location of the dam is perfectly which captures all the watershed on the upstream over here, and from here it is the physical river Godavari that is witnessed by all of us, which flows through the city of Nasik over here and starts flowing outside the district of Nasik as well, goes to Paitan and Aurangabad on the downstream. Okay, so this is a small satellite image which will make you understand what is the kind of geography and geology that we are talking about, which gives rise to this riparian zone of Godavari. The riparian zones which are there in the Deccan Plateau are of varied kinds and different combinations and landscape settings. So this is a mountain range which is necessarily a dry mountain range because of deforestation that has taken place over a period of time. But because of the elevation, the rainfall is really very high over here in the Trambakeshwar region. It is around 1500 millimeters to 2000 millimeters in the monsoons, and that is why the river Godavari is very well fed by the rainfall and the accumulation of water by the from this watershed on the upstream. These are some photographs to give you an understanding of the overall landscape of the uh, region of Trimbakeshwar. It's a very typical geological and a geomorphological setting where these are called as the mesas and the buttes. And these mesas and the buttes form a very scenic, picturesque view in the season of monsoon, where we can see these kind of waterfalls coming down out of these sharp escarpments, and this becomes a very picturesque setting over here in the season of June, July, and August, latter of the monsoon season. And of course, this is a formation of a dissected plateau where there is some amount of deciduous forests which are there, which we can relate to the category of deciduous forests, scrub forests, which are there at the foothills of this mountains. And the Trimbakeshwar, the small town of Trimbakeshwar, is located on the plains of this hill range. As you must be knowing that Trimbakeshwar is one of the Jyotirlingas of India, and hence it's a famous pilgrimage place in the northern part of Maharashtra. Yeah, so this is to make you understand what are we really going to talk about today. We are going to talk about the flow of river Godavari through the city of Nasik and its related riparian zone, which can be classified into two types today based on the current prevailing conditions. A typology of riparian zone which is still not surrounded by human land use or a land use that is developed by people, and this is this kind of a stretch which is a non-intervened landscape. This is a landscape or this is a riparian zone where there is partial intervention of the city development which is happening from the right hand side banks. This is a stretch where the development has already happened on both the sides, and that is why this is a different kind of a riparian zone and landscape that we will be seeing. And then this is another stretch where the development is still going to happen, but it is planned as the future development in the for the city of Nasik. So the basic elevation that we are going to discuss about River Godavari ranges between 575 meters to around 600 meters to 620 meters, you can say at the most. So we are going to see the flow of River Godavari, which starts at a range of around 575 and goes down to around 520 meters above the mean sea level. And here is a small reference of the range of Trimbakeshwar, which comes down over here. And you can see this range is around 1300 to 1400 meters above the sea level. The drainage pattern of river Godavari over here is really very interesting. It is there from all the four sides, where small tributaries such as the Darna, the Waghadi, the Nagzira, then the Kadwa, these all small rivers, they contribute to make this river a very fulfilling river in the month of monsoon and later on to some extent. Yes, as I told you that today's point of discussion for riparian zones is with respect how riparian zone is located or situated in an urban context, in a semi-urban context, and in a completely non-urban context. Okay, so this is the basic development plan of city of Nasik, where you can particularly see this region is not there because this basic plan is developed so there only for the physical development of city of Nasik. So here is the stretch which comes from river from Gangapur Dam, and the river Godavari enters into the planned zone of the city of Nasik and flows through the city of Nasik. As you can see that the development of city of Nasik is comparatively balanced on both the sides. This is the right hand side banks and this is the left hand side banks of the river Godavari. This area is called as the historical development of city of Nasik, which started developing during the Peshwa period, somewhere around in the late 16th century, around 1670s and 1670 100 onwards, and prospered and developed till around 1780, 1790. After that, the British rule was exercised over here in this region, and lot of developments have happened in the city of Nasik during the British period also. So this was the core area. This is called as the core area or the holy spot or the most religiously significant spot in the city of Nasik, where the basic historical culture of Nasik city and a basic relation with the river Godavari has developed because of this historical development on the banks of river Godavari. During my presentation, you will come across what is the historical significance of this spot that I'm trying to tell you, and what is the mythological significance, and the what is the historical significance. We will see in the latter slides. So this is to give you an understanding that how the river becomes the focus of an entire city, irrespective of getting developed after the independence. We can say that this development plan has started taking place after the independence period, majorly after 1985, when these concepts of town planning came into realization. Nasik was no exception, and that is why this is the fourth town planning or the development plan that is happening with respect to Nasik. And the river remains over here, and the city is growing around the river. This is one of the major tributaries of river Godavari called as the river Waghadi. This is river Aruna that comes and joins river Godavari over here. This is a historically significant river which originates on a small mountain called as Ramshes over here, and these are the other small tributaries which make their way to the river Godavari and come and meet over here. Okay, so this becomes a very important, naturally important point as well. I will let you know the features why this point is naturally important, and since it was a naturally blessed, a gifted, or a rich source of water over here, why this settlements came over here by the Peshwas. Yes, so this is Gangapur Dam over here. This is a small streams that originates from Gangapur Dam over here. This is River Alandi, one of the small tributaries of not more than around 3 to 4 kilometers, originating over here and comes and joins River Godavari. So this is the point from where we will start looking at the riparian zone of River Godavari, and till a point where it goes out of the Nasik municipal development limits, the corporation limits of the city of Nasik. This is the holy spot or the religious spot that I have told you in the previous slide. This is the existing development which has happened till today, and this is something that is proposed as or is in the process of getting developed. Yes, this is a spot called as the Gangapur and the Govardhan area. You can see over here, this is the embankment of the dam, which you can see as a straight line over here. And this stream originates at the bottom of this embankment through the gates of the dam, which are opened, and then the streams and the river Godavari starts flowing. This is a piece of land, or this is a context where the city of Nasik has not developed. Okay, and here the character of the riparian landscape is of this kind, which we normally visualize as a very healthy and a sound section of a riparian zone that we imagine. You can see all the cross sections or all the elements of a riparian zone with respect to vegetation in this region of Godavari. The bushes, the hedges, the grasses, the small trees, and then the woodlands. Of course, the woodlands are not a part because this entire region has become inhabited by smaller villages over here, and there is only agricultural practice. So the last component of a woodland is missing over here in this riparian composition of River Godavari in the city of or in the region of Nasik. But we can certainly see these three layers of aquatic vegetation, then vegetation that grows in swamps, and vegetation that grows on the upland, to a story of the third tier, that is the story of trees, is normally observed in this context of Govardhan and Gangapur. Gangapur and Govardhan are two villages which were developed by the Peshwas, out of which Govardhan village has a mythological significance. It is said that one Brahmin had gifted a cow over here in the Govardhan village, and that is why go it is. If you split this word in Marathi or Hindi, it is Govardhan. Go यानी गाय हम जिसको बोलते हैं, तो गाय का जिस जगह पे दान किया है ब्राह्मण ने, और गाय का दान करने से जिसको पुण्य की प्राप्ति होती है, ऐसा ये स्थान है. And that is why mythologically this spot on river Godavari, which happens to be the first spot, is important. Archaeologically also this is important because there have been finds of prehistoric settlements, and tools which are developed by prehistoric man were also found at this spot. And later on in the third stage, the Peshwas also developed it as a good spot for a temple, a small temple complex that they had developed now, which is in ruins, but it is still existing on the banks over here. This is the new development which has happened over here around 5 to 10 years before, 5 years before, I suppose. So at the origin, the character of the riparian zone of Godavari is in this manner. Then it comes down to a small village settlement where you can see there is a congruence between the development or the character of the development and the riparian zone, which still exists on the background of River Godavari. These two images are particularly to showcase the average scenario of river Godavari when it is flowing after the month of September and October, when there is a release of water from this dam, and what amount and what is the level of water in this riparian zone. We normally visualize that a riparian zone is with a river which is full from one level to one level, and we can see a very good length of water stretch in the riverbed. But here you will find that this riparian zone of Godavari is typically different, since it is not a perennial river and it is a monsoon fed river or a rainfall dependent river. The hydrology or the water level in the riverbed is very important, and it is very crucial for the riparian zone over here, and it keeps on fluctuating, and this fluctuation affects the existence of the riparian biota over there with respect to the flora and the fauna on the banks of this river. So you can see a situation over here when there are floods in the month of June and July. Okay, the water level rises by around 3 to 4 meters in the bed of river Godavari. This is a small section which will make you it understand in a better manner. This is the blue line where this is the water level which rises maybe thrice or four times in a period of 25 years. And this is a level of water which rises once or twice in a period of 100 of years. But here you can see if this is the normal water level which we can observe for in the months of September, October, and which goes down also in the month of March and April. This is the water level which rises up during the monsoons, which is there, and this is which comes up when there are torrential rains or rainfall which is much high above the average rainfall. Okay, so you will be seeing these kind of cross sections which are developed by one of my colleagues, Gayatri Karkhanis, who recently completed her post graduation in landscape, and she made a lot of good contribution and value addition to the understanding of landscape of Godavari. So here you can see the cross section of river Godavari, where the settlement falls on the higher side or the higher elevation of the banks, and there is no settlement on the lower elevation of the banks. So this explains to us how man has started approaching and associating himself with actually the riverfront, or actually the edge of water that we call. Man always wanted to have access to water, and he wanted it for his own daily living, for the purpose of drinking, for the purpose of feeding his cows and cattle, for the purpose of agriculture. But at the same time, he wanted to guard himself also with respect to the vagaries of such kind of floods which we have in the rivers. And that is why it was a very wise decision that, of course, and obviously, the settlements, or he built his residences above a level where the floods could not affect the houses, or the houses were not devastated by the rising water levels in the monsoon season. So I take this context of Godavari as a very original context where it is still not hampered by the urban nuances which are happening in the cities today, where you can make ourselves where we can make ourselves understand about so many features and associations, how we developed with the riverfront. Where did we build our houses? From where did we access the river? What were the access points from where we could reach up to the actual water and fetch it for our daily living? So I really like this kind of a context which is there just around 12 kilometers away from the place where I live and the main city of Nasik. Then we come down to another, a very interesting point on the river Godavari is the Someshwar Falls. Someshwar is a place where there is a shrine of Lord Shankara. It is also a mythological place, mythologically important place. Where there are certain stories which are there, which have got associated with this spot. So the first importance of this point is the mythological association, and the second important point is the natural feature of this point. Over here, the bed of river Godavari takes a drop of around 20 to 30 feet. It's a sudden drop over here at this point over here, and there's a fall that gets developed over here in this entire bed of river Godavari. As you can see in this image, we know that a river is a continuous flow of water, right? But here there is a certain amount of disruption with respect to the geology and the geomorphology of the riverbed, and this gives rise to a different kind of a riparian zone which has got developed over here. It is not the normal association of a bank what we see on the river, on the river sides, but it is an extension of a landform which has got developed over here, and the waterway has carved its own way to flow out on the at the lower point. This is the higher point and this is the lower point. So this is a continuation of a landmass which has taken place maybe millions of years ago, when actually the Deccan formations were taking place. Okay, and slowly and gradually, since the water wanted to make its way to flow down on the downstream, this was a channel through which the river started flowing as a basic stream. And when there are floods, of course this level or this bedrock also gets covered, and you have a waterfall which takes place to this entire length of the width of the river. Okay, so here you can see now that the rocky outcrops have started surfacing. Okay, the it is a combination of rocky outcrops and a minimal soil cover which is reflected on the banks of the river Godavari. You can see the profile of river Godavari has flattened out here, and the basin has become larger. It has become wider over here in at this context, as you can see. The width of this basin over here is around 100 to 120 meters over here. It will be easy for you to visualize, because since you must be students of architecture as well, you will be able to visualize this kind of a river width that we are discussing. It is around 100 to 120 meters. Okay, and as you can see, this is the composition of geology over here, where the drop is exercised or it is seen, and the river flows from this upper level to the lower level, and it has become a scenic and an interesting tourist spot over a period of time in the city of Nasik. In the surroundings on this spot, a little bit of downstream, if you can see this landscape in the month of monsoon, this is the kind of landscape or the character of vegetation which you can see in the month of summers, where the grasses completely dry up, the rocky outcrops start surfacing, they are exposed completely, with a minimum vegetation of the trees which is observed on the banks of river Godavari. Here you can see the minimum water level which is maintained, which is good enough for doing a small activity of boating over here by the tourist, but for a small amount, and the water level over here in the month of summer. So this is another peculiar character of river Godavari at this spot of Someshwar, where the river seems to have the river bed seems to have an extended landform. The river has carved out its way throughout this rocky bed, and there's a certain amount of drop over here in this river bed. After this drop of 30 to 40 feet, the river flows in a plain completely. There are no drops such as big as this in the entire riverbed which flows through the city of Nasik. Yeah. So coming downstream of Someshwar, here now we can see that the flattened or the widened riverbed with some topsoil which is observed over here, with some kind of aquatic vegetation or the grasses which grow along the banks, partially in water, partially on land, and this here you can see completely the upland vegetation, as we call in the terminology of a riparian zone, with trees over here. This is a small guava farm over here, which where the agricultural practices, as I told you, and this section of river Godavari keeps on changing. Here the landform rises up to a height of around 5 to 6 meters. Here it is completely a shallow landform where the river stretches itself during the monsoons. Here onwards, on the downstream again you can see the landform rises to a higher level, and the profile of the river bank changes over here. As we come downstream, here you can see the settlement or the urban inserts which have started reflecting after a certain point from the banks of actual river Godavari. Okay, so these are the modern developments which have started figuring in the on the landscape of river Godavari when it enters into the corporation limits of the city of Nasik. Yes, participants, are you able to understand the whatever I'm trying to tell you?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes,
Yes,
ma'am.
ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, okay. Coming downstream again, now you can see that I've particularly inserted this image of River Godavari, where I was speaking about an area where the development is happening from one side, but the other side is still undeveloped and untouched by the urban development of Nasik city. And here as well you can see a particularly the difference on one side where the development has happened, and on the other side where the riparian zone is still intact and still can is in a natural condition or a semi natural condition, you might say. I would really not say that these pictures as we are seeing today on River Godavari are the natural conditions. They must have got modified in the past 50 years, 100 years, but they are there at least since 50 years, and that is why we can call them as the current existing natural conditions. So you can see this is a side, this is the left hand side bank, which is not encroached upon or developed by the city as a corporation limit, and this is the side which is getting developed. Okay, this is still on the upstream of the major city which is coming on the downside of river Godavari. This is an extended part of the city of Nasik, and that is why you can see there is a certain amount of belt which is still not developed as a physical development of the city of Nasik. Now there is a proposal of developing a walkway over here on this banks over here on this side, and it is proposed to have a pedestrian zone or an pedestrian zone for the citizens of Nasik for basic purpose of exercise. Yeah, this is another view when we come again downstream, and one of the nice and a very differential feature of river Godavari within this stretch of 21 kilometers. Sorry, I forgot to mention that we will be discussing about river Godavari, which is a stretch of around 21 kilometers from Gangapur Dam to the point where it flows out of the river corporation limits of Nasik. Okay, so within this 21 kilometers of river Godavari, there are around four proper bends in the river flow or the edge of the river through which it flows. And this is a very peculiar character, you know. Why? Because Deccan basalt is not a soft rock where the rivers are able to carve their own way very easily. Okay, oh, and over a smaller period of time. As you must be knowing that Deccan basalt is a igneous kind of a rock formation. It is a very hard and compact rock formation, and that is why the qualities of erosion are particularly lesser with respect to the sedimentary rocks and the metamorphic rocks. And that is why the character of river Godavari, where it has around five bends, if you must have observed in the basic plan of river Godavari, these bends, they support or they encourage the riparian habitats on the riverfront, and the riparian habitats are of different kind as it passes through these kind of different cross sections within the in this region of Nasik. Okay, so here you can see that this kind of a bend is not a very curvature is not a very common curvature that can be observed in the Deccan rivers, especially of this kind of a scale. I'm not speaking about the tributaries which have smaller bends, twists, and turns, and they make their own way out of the rocky formations where there are slopes. But this is a bend which is happening in a plain, and that is why it gives rise to certain kinds of different riparian zones which are there along the banks of the river. As you can see here that the city of Nasik has started getting developed. This photograph is taken from a 10th or 11th story of a building which has recently got developed, and you can get a panoramic view of the complete river from building of a on the right hand side bank. As you can see, the riparian zone is nicely developed by some of the stakeholders which are there on the banks of this river. And if they are nicely developed by people who are having public holdings, okay, or institutional land uses, have seen to it that they have maintained some amount of a riparian character in the development of the trees when they are confronting the riverside. This is an institution called as the KTHM campus, and they have a riverfront of around 3 to 4 kilometers. Their campus is having a riverfront of 3 to 4 kilometers, and they have a boat club where the water is retained in front of this campus because of a small weir on the upstream. Okay, so one small good effort I acknowledge is like they have not disturbed the character of what keeps on happening naturally with this edge of the river and the land, of the water and the land particularly. Still coming down, this is a very pleasant surprise where you will not even feel that you are in the city of Nasik, and you are surrounded by such a dense and a compact development of a city. And this point is absolutely adjacent to the holy stretch which falls on the downstream, and this is maintained because the land use on both the sides of river Godavari is governed by the government complexes. On this side, it is the social forestry, and on the other side, it is still not developed. It is still agricultural land use, and that is why this is only one particular patch of around 1.5 kilometers, where if the river water level is complete with respect to the width of the river, then this is a kind of a scenario that we can see in the month of August and July. And if the water is completely clean, free of water hyacinth or any pollutants, then we are blessed sometimes to see this kind of a composition. And this is also one of the compositions where I told you that a citizens park or a pedestrian park is about to get developed. And this is the bridge which we are seeing from the downstream towards the bridge. And this is a point from where I am seeing towards the upstream of the bridge. So this bridge remains the constant. This feature is from the upstream, and this is the downstream of this bridge. Okay, so this is one of the stretches which is still there as a scenic composition of riparian landscape. I would not say this is an healthy or a sound riparian landscape that is there on the banks of Godavari. Immediately after this, as I told you, we come down to the holy stretch or the religious stretch of river Godavari. This stretch is important mythologically because it is said that Lord Ram performed the last rites of his father on Ramkunda over here, which was constructed on the confluence of river Aruna and river Godavari. Now you can see over here why we need to study the rivers very correctly before we comment on their riparian aspects. Riparian aspects, as we feel that they are always associated with forests and grasses and grasslands and everything. I feel that riparian aspects are also connected with the surface flows and the surface streams which come and join the main course of river. This is a point on the river Godavari where there are around five surface major streams which come and contribute to the flow of the river Godavari. And hence, this seems to be a logical reason why the Peshwas selected this spot for developing their own settlement. Because of the availability of water in such amount was needed for any settlement, and it was available, the first physical noticeable development started happening on this spot of river Godavari. Then it got probably associated with this spot of confluence of Aruna and Godavari, where Prabhu Ram had performed the last rites of his father while he was in exile, and this area was also called as the Dandakaranya. Extension, the western or the northern extension of Dandakaranya is supposed to be the region of river Godavari. Okay. Then further, during the 1600s and the 1800, the river bank was developed into the formation into ghats. Okay, as you people are located in Madhya Pradesh, you must be very well aware of the ghats built by Ahilya Bai Holkar on river Narmada at Maheshwar, and the ghats at Omkareshwar also, exquisite and one of its kind examples of a riverfront development those we have in India, and to be acknowledged as one of the most sensitive developments world across, where the intervention is so gradual, the intervention is so subtle that we don't ever realize when we are going from one kind of a context of a human development to a natural context. So, based on those similar lines which the Peshwas saw during that time, they developed the ghats or the river banks of Godavari also on the similar lines by developing temples and carving out kunds within the riverbed. Okay, so this is one of the sensitive approaches of dealing with a riparian zone or a riverbed, where even if an intervention is there, it is so minimal and it is so subtle that you only make a place for your own small activity without disturbing the natural setting of a rocky bed. Disturbing a rocky bed is not very easy, because you know that it is not easy for us to carve the way for water to flow. What is there naturally flowing, you just have to articulate it. So what the Peshwas did was, whatever was the stream of water and in whatever manner or the direction it was flowing, they just carved out smaller and simpler edges for them to access the waterfront, to make it usable and to make it available for their daily purpose. And because of the settlements that they had developed, here you can see all the residences, those were developed on the banks of the river Godavari. Yeah, so these are a few images. These are some images and photographs which are shared by the longtime photographers over here in Nasik. And here you can see that the natural bed of river Godavari is kept intact, and the kunds are just an articulation of the river bed with rocky steps in the rock bed only, and the river flows in a natural manner from the upstream to the downstream. There are around 17 kunds which are carved out by the sardars of the Peshways over here, and they are named by their own names. म्हणजे सरदारों के नाम से ही ये कुंड को उनको नाम रखा है, उनसे उनके नाम से ही ये अभी भी जाने जाते हैं. And these are a few temples which were again developed by the sardars. Yeah. When we are talking about culture and river, I feel that the stories of mythology also become very important for us to understand why we develop temples on a certain stage. Why was it a major temple? Why was it a smaller temple? Was it a shrine, or was it some other kind of a religious feature? So there's a small story of one temple over here that is called as the Sundar Narayan temple. Okay. Now, why this name of Sundar Narayan? Okay, why this name? It is a temple of Vishnu, and there is a story that once Lord Vishnu was cursed by one wife of a wicked demon. The name of the demon was Jalandhar. और उनकी जो वाइफ थी वृंदा, उन्होंने विष्णु को कर्स किया, शाप दिया कि आप बुरे हो जाओगे, यू विल बिकम अगली. And Vishnu got really very tensed, like when he started looking ugly, black and everything. So it is said that he came over here on this stretch of river Godavari, took a dip over here in the waters of Godavari, and then he became again fair and original, as he was an original lord. And that is why it is called as Sundar Narayan. विष्णु को नारायण बुलाते हैं, और गोदावरी में नहा के उनको गोदावरी ने फिर से सुंदर कर दिया, ठीक कर दिया, तो इसलिए उनका नाम अभी सुंदर नारायण हो गया. तो ये जब पेशवे के जो सरदार थे उन्होंने जब पढ़ा, तो उन्होंने उसी नाम से यहाँ एक मंदिर बनवाया. ये मंदिर अभी ऐसी जगह पे बना है कि 21 मार्च को अपना जो इक्विनॉक्स का डे होता है, ये होता है दक्षिणायन, उत्तरायण शुरू होता है, like isn't it, now we are in the month of January. On 21st of March the Dakshinayan will come to an end, and the sun will go into the northern hemisphere, and that is called as the Uttarayan. So Uttarayan जब शुरू होता है, the first day of Uttarayan is marked by when the sun rays fall on the feet of the Sundar Narayan deity, which is there in the Garbhagruha of this temple. Okay. So these are the kind of conjunctive approaches which were practiced by man, even if they were working with nature and they were executing their own ambitions of building temples. You know, these temples had a relevance to the natural features such as the sun path, such as the course of the river, such as the natural flow of the river, and such as the elevation on which the temple is placed. Okay, there is one temple on this river bed which has a ring, which has a bell, you know, that is called as the Naro Shankar bell, hum usko bulate hai. This bell was bought by the Peshwas from one of the fights that they had with the Portuguese people in Goa. और वहां से उन्होंने एक बड़ा उठा के बेल लाया और एक टेम्पल में उसको ऐसी जगह पे बिठाया है that if the water level in the river bed rises to that level, the bell starts ringing, and it is an automatic declaration to all the residents on the banks that the river has crossed the high flood level. Now it has reached a dangerous level, and all of us need to take care. So it was not necessary for the sardars or the peshways to make an effort to announce that the river has reached this kind of a level. When the bell automatically started ringing, it was a self declaration that the water level has risen so much that we need to take care. So, when we talk about cultural riparian zones, we cannot forget the intervention of man or the association of man, which was so sensitively done in the historical context. Another religious significance is the conduction of Simhastha Kumbh Mela over here on the river Godavari, which happens once in 12 years. Nasik is one of the four places, Allahabad, Haridwar, Ujjain, and Nashik, where the Simhastha Kumbh Mela is held. And a small story why we call this city as Nashik is it is heard and believed that Lord Rama, while he was in exile, he cut the nose of Shurpanakha over here, and that is why it is called as Nasika, which became Nashik after some point of time. Yes. Then coming downstream of the religious stretch, we come to a stretch called as Tapovan. Tapovan, this name itself indicates that this was a part of Dandakaranya in the historical period, and that is why it had a forest kind. It had a forest category and characteristics of such kind that people, sages or hermits, they used to come over here and they were involved in doing meditation. It was a surrounding and a setting for all of them to do good kind of meditation, and that is why it is called as Tapovan. And as you can see over here, the profile is completely different. It is a rise of around 20 to 30 meters which takes place suddenly on the banks of river Godavari over here on one side, and these are the developments which have come up on the downstream of the holy religious stretch. The point over here of which I want to showcase is in the previous photographs where it is of historical development, we saw that the banks of the riverbed were kept in the natural condition. The natural rock surface was itself articulated to make it usable for man. And here in the new development during the last Simhastha Kumbh Mela and yet previous Simhastha Kumbh Mela, since last 24 years, if we take a cycle of 12 years, two cycles of Simhastha Kumbh Mela, the river bank has started being concretized. Whatever development is happening is in the artificial form of this kind, which is developing the stretch into stepped platforms in with the material and with the technology of concrete. So this has given rise to a certain complexity of a riverine system or the function of a riparian zone that normally happens. If I go back to this slide over here, as I told you, that this point of the holy stretch was selected by the Peshwas for settlements for two reasons. First, the availability of surface waters through these smaller tributaries, and the second important aspect was the availability of water in the ground. That we call as the groundwater. Whatever vadas which are developed over here as the old Gauthan, at least every three vadas there was a well which was observed over here. In the gazetteer which is mentioned by gazetteer which was written by the Britishers in around 1938 or so, if I'm not mistaken, there is a mention of 2300 wells which are recorded over here in the Gauthan. So that itself speaks about the riparian zone or the river being a, a water element which is there because of two types of water availability, that is the surface water and the groundwater. Okay, so again going back, as you can see over here, the natural river bed or the bank of the bed is maintained. It is simply a carving of the steps which makes enables a person to use the waterfront and as well as go away without hampering the natural system of the flow of water which comes in the main river bed. Whereas in contrast, over here you can see we are constructing and covering all these rock surfaces by this kind of an development which is happening for the utility of man or the other functions of man. Here also you can see that there is a retaining wall that is getting constructed. To deal with such kind of slopes, the intervention that we are proposing and devising today is building such RCC retaining walls which will completely hamper the relation between the upland of a riparian zone and the river bed of a riparian zone. Okay, so the outflows which are there, the subsurface flows which are there, and the groundwater flows which are getting developed and which keep this system in a cycle will certainly get hampered because of this kind of an intervention which is happening on the banks of River Godavari for Simhastha Kumbh Mela. And the last point over here is the point where the river starts flowing outside the corporation limits. And if you remember my first slide, where the development has still not gone, but is likely to come in the coming 30 to 40 years, this kind of a stretch also will be lost in the coming few years if we don't take the proper precaution of protecting these kind of banks of river Godavari. Yeah, so here, as you can see, this is the last bridge which falls in the corporation limit and can be termed as the last point from where this river starts flowing outside the corporation limits, the so-called defined corporation limit. This is the agricultural zone, and you can see it is completely the plains of Godavari which get formulated over here. The rocky character, the mountainous character drops over here, it becomes minimum over here as a typical feature of all the rivers in India. And this is where the last development of ghats is seen over here, and which was there for done by for the Kumbh Mela. This is one of the tributaries which comes and joins River Godavari, And unfortunately now there is the outlet of a STP which is there built on across this on the banks of this small tributary. The outlet from the STP is let out over here and it flows into the river Godavari. So this outlet does not only pollute the water, but it also hampers the riparian vegetation over here and the quality of biotic life which exists on the riparian banks. Yeah. So now, what are the major issues that we need to address or we need to understand from such kind of a context in a second tier town? Please note my words. The city of Nasik is a second tier town. It's not a first tier town like the city of Pune and Mumbai, okay, where the issues are by and large really very big. They are very severe and they are very detrimental to the health of the river or the riparian zones that we are talking about. So here, putting this riverfront in the context of a second tier town, that is the city of Nasik, the major issues that we have identified and that we are working upon is the landslides. Recently, in 2018, 17, I'm sorry, we had high floods because of torrential rains and over a small period of time, within 48 hours, the rainfall was very high over here in the city of Nasik, and because of which a small landslide happened. This is a development has happened where, as like a retreat or a club on the left hand side bank. This was a small party area that the people had developed, and the flood level was so high till this point of time that this complete piece of land, a quarter of their party lawn, got was given off, okay, and the small amount of landslide. So this was an indication that the water is not something that will flow from one line to the other line. It will have a connection to the through the subsurface and the surface as well, and it will show its impact in some or the other manner. And this landslide is now reflected in this kind of a bulge in a landform that is there within the natural course of the river flow, which is over here. Now we are going to observe it over a period of time whether this kind of a bulge gets washed away in the coming rainy seasons during the coming flows, or whether it creates a hindrance for the river flow in the coming years. The second point is the outlet of the STPs, which is directly coming to the river beds. Okay, so here actually it is the riverfront, as you can see in this. These two photographs are taken from the same point. You can see the base of the manhole over here. This is the manhole over here, and this is the outlet of a small drainage or a stream that comes from the upland of the city of Nasik, and which gets converted, which directly is released into the river Godavari. Irrespective of that, as we say that nature is resilient, right? Nature takes care of itself to an extent where it can take care of itself, to an extent from where it can survive. This kind of a vegetation still survives on the banks, even though this kind of a pollution or polluting agent is there. In most of the cities wide across our country and otherwise internationally also, we will find that the sewage lines get developed in these riparian zones. And if these sewage lines, if they are not maintained correctly at that point of time, they are a big agent of pollution, polluting the riparian zone and the river water. Okay, so according to my experience, Nasik city is still in a condition where these drainage lines are maintained at least 70 to 80%. Rest of the 15 to 20% keeps on happening, but that also proves to be detrimental at some point of times, where we can actually see the color of water changes after that pollutant has come into the riverbed. So laying of drainage lines needs to be critically done, and it is still developing in the city of Nasik. We need to take care of it once for the remaining areas. And the fourth important point is the concretization of such kind of riparian zones where it is not necessary. where it is once in a while happening. If the Kumbh Mela is happening after only every 12 years, do we really need to concretize and put such artificial layers of sand and concrete and cement on these natural layers of the riverine edges? Is something that we are confronting now and we are discussing, and we are trying to find a solution towards it with respect to how the porosity or the natural edge conditions of such kind of belt can be retained and be restored. Yeah, a very, very important point with respect to the rivers which flow within the city. The river stretches which flow within the villages or the non-urban areas, they need not be bothered about these two issues of the red line and the blue line. Probably in the last 2 3 days you must have heard from the other experts that this is one of the identifications of river of any rivers in India now, that is the red line and the blue line. In the beginning of my talk I told you that a blue line is a line of water level in a river which is marked over a period of 25 years. A water level marked over a period within a frame of 25 years is called as the blue line. And a water level which is marked over a period of within a frame of 100 years is called as the red line. Okay. So we can consider that the red line is one of its kind happening where if any calamity happens, we just have to accept it and go over it, because so it is going to happen once in a lifetime. Our lifetime is not more than 80 to 90 years maximum, right? And that is why we call it as once in a lifetime. So maybe we just have to make ourselves conscious about it. Yeah, if I am building something over here within this area, I'm likely to get affected sometime, some or the other time, because the water level might rise from the river over here and can hit my development over here. What I need to bother about more is the blue line, because the level of water or the performance of rivers has become erratic because of the erratic rainfall pattern and the climate change that we are facing right away. Okay, so based on my experience and the discussions with the experts in this field, I feel that the protection or the development within these blue lines needs to be devised and developed for the urban scenarios as well. As you can see in one of these cross sections, this is a minimum water level which flows in Godavari. This is the blue line which is developed over a period of 25 years, and this is the red line. Okay. So the red line is one phenomena that we have recently witnessed in 2017, and blue line is a normal phenomena which we witness every monsoon. Okay. So there have to be a very conscious approach while we are doing any development within the actual water line and the blue line. At least this kind of a zone needs to be protected in utmost of its sanctity in the urban stretches of the river fronts. And these itself can be called as the most critical riparian zone that a river needs for herself or for itself. You know, I call them as side margins of rivers. Jaise we as architects we build our buildings, right? When we propose a building in a plot, we always leave some kind of margins for proper ventilation of sunlight, wind flow and everything, so that a person who is staying in that property is able to live in good natural conditions, isn't it? And that is why we leave these kind of margins. There are certain kind of bylaws and building development rules which tell us that if you have to build a single story building, this is the kind of a margin. If you are building a 7-story building, this is the kind of a margin. So I call this blue line as a margin in language of architects, where it needs to be protected, and there have to be a set of rules to protect at least the riparian zone between the blue lines where the river flow within the cities. So Summarizing this discussion today about how the river Godavari has flown into the non-developed region of the Nasik and the developed region of Nasik, we can see there are it is a combination or it is an outcome of the basic three natural characters. The first is the geomorphology, the second is the soil conditions, and the third is the geology of this region. The geology, as explained to you, is the Deccan Trap formations, which makes it very difficult for the river to change its course now and hence it is established that this river course is an established river course over a period of thousands of years, because it is not easy for a river to carve out Deccan Trap formation as compared to the sedimentary and the metamorphic rock formations. Secondly, the geology determines the groundwater flow, which is very deep in this region. Recently, week before, I have witnessed two bore wells which were drilled on the banks of River Godavari, and the groundwater was available at a depth of around 180 to 200 feet. But there was water on actually the immediate banks of River Godavari, and this water also contributes for the flow of the river. So it is not this riparian zone of river Godavari is not only a conjunction or a combination of the soil conditions and the vegetation, but an output and effect of the geology and the geomorphology as well. As you can see, this is an indicative diagram to show that this is an effluent stream. This river Godavari, in the terminology of terminology of the field of geology, is called as an effluent water stream, where the water stream is also fed from the groundwater once a water level is developed in the surrounding regions. Okay. And although we feel that these rocky outcrops are impervious, they are highly compact and water cannot flow. It is the natural geological composition of the cracks, the fractures, and the other permeability aspects which allows the water to flow into the river Godavari over here. So the findings of the riparian zone that we have over here in the originating belt of river Godavari is that the riparian zone is a landscape unit, and it is open to the fluxes of the river systems and upland. Okay, it is not a protected river system such as a riparian zone, such as a forest riparian zone, which is a sort of a confined and a protected riparian zone. This riparian zone is open, it is vulnerable, it is accessible, and it gets influenced by the fluxes of river system and the upland systems. The riparian zones are driven mainly by the bioclimatic, geomorphological, and land use conditions. This stretch of 21 kilometers has shown you adequately what kind of land use influences the riparian character of River Godavari, which changes over a period of time under the influence of natural and human drivers. It is a co-constructed context, that is, it is driven by the natural and social processes. Social processes, we try to understand how we connect with ourselves by doing the natural by doing some religious acts activities on the riverfront, and natural is always what is existing. From the functional perspective, the delineation needs to be done for the conservation, restoration, and upgradation of this important riparian zones. What is lacking in India today is absolutely the delineation of these kind of zones, which are so important. If we are so particular about marking our own plot boundaries when we are paying for it so properly, and we understand the value of our hard work and the money that we have earned, we need to understand the hard work that nature has done for us throughout these thousands of years, and at least respectfully delineate what the river demands at it as its margins to survive for itself. these riparian zones or the banks of the river are are the margins of the river for herself to survive, and that is why they at least need to be delineated in an urban context to make the people understand why, if they're throwing garbage or waste in this riparian zone, they are doing something bad to the river of their own river that they have. This delineation would help to consider and manage the riparian zone using a real integrated process able to combine most of the issues related to the riparian zone and its associated stakeholders. There are lot many examples across the world where the stakeholder participation has been done, and it has given outstanding results with respect to the maintaining of these riparian zones where the rivers are flowing within the cities. I need not speak about those examples, but we certainly have something to look forward which is happening around us as well, where the riparian zones are taken care of by the stakeholders. And to sum up and conclude my talk today, uh, we all of us sometimes hymn a very famous line from lyrical compositions, Jamuna Kinare Muragaon. So, what are these riparian zones according to me? They are the banks, like in local languages, they are the kinare, जिसको हम banks बोल सकते हैं, and they are so inherently integrated in our own in our day to day life, and that is the best indication I feel in any culture, I would say, where the cultural reflection is seen with a riparian zone. Jamuna Kinare Muragaon. This is one idealistic picture from a childhood that we always nurture in our minds. How will be my house? Where is my village? Where do I live? Where do I come from? And this is the association that we share with this kind of a important ecological feature of a river. Thank you.
Uh, Many thank you, ma'am. It was a wonderful presentation, and your engagement with the riparian zone as a scholar and as an activist was very well evident. And thank you for summarizing your 25 years of journey into an hour. And the presentation was extremely, that brought about the debate on successful delineation of riparian zones. So if our participants would have been, I think I am sure they must have now, they had this vague idea or this debate, how does one actually delineate? This would have certainly be cleared now. So I'll give you a detailed thank you later, but I'll request the participants to ask any questions if they have.
Yeah.
Hello, ma'am. This is Deepika. It was a
Yeah.
beautiful presentation. It was a beautiful story, rather. It almost feels like the river is a living story. And we can relate, I'm sure, to the life and development of people and the river in history, the way you had mentioned. Uh, I would just know that today, when cities are developing, do they really look at the river the way you are saying? Like, in a way, Nasik has been quite sensitive to the river compared to other cities in the country. So, do you feel there was an intervention of a scholar or like you or somebody which respected the river, or did it happen due to the religious or cultural faith?
Yes, ma'am, because of this historical context in Nasik, there is at least an awareness within the citizens to at least make an attempt to understand what is a river with us. Although the implementation of certain things is still not there, the human habits are universal everywhere, all across the world, and they are similarly found over here in Nasik also. But since this Sumasta activity takes place, and there are a few good groups which which are working on the riverfront, and people alike, we are at least assured that people won't damage the riverfront to a very bad extent. They will at least think twice before working with the river, and they'll take an opinion at least. That is a kind of a condition or a status of the citizens in the city of Nasik. So the first credit goes because of the historical significance, which is there in everybody's mind, and secondly, because of the work that is going on in the present day.
Thank you, ma'am. It was a very nice experience to hear you as well as see that the river is respected in such a way, which I rarely see in today's cities.
Yeah.
So, yeah, thank you.
Okay. If necessary, Sonal ma'am, they can keep me posted if they give you questions after some time also. At the end of this workshop, I think you have your workshop another day also, tomorrow also, right?
We have it till 11th. 11th.
11th, yeah, yeah, yeah,
So
fine.
definitely our students can definitely connect with you, and
Yeah,
will definitely, as and when the queries arise when they are actually working, they
yeah,
would like to get some guidance from you, ma'am. Once
yeah,
again, ma'am, thank you very much. It was a very well narrated journey about the river. It did not shy away from giving a very conclusive and clear remark about clear delineation of what belongs to river actually. And I think it
yeah,
is very important for our students as well as participants to really dovetail this kind of in-depth study with the natural layers assessment that they have started learning, and how to then draw inferences, and how these inferences can give you conclusive remarks. So thank you very much, ma'am. Thank you very,
my
very much.
pleasure. Thank you, Sonal, for inviting me on this workshop of yours. It seems to be a very intensive workshop that all of you people are doing for 5 days long. If there's kind of a souvenir which is coming out of this workshop, or some kind of findings you're recording them as a booklet or something, do share those with them with me. I would like to go across the other presentations the other experts must have done during this workshop, and the input the students must have also given on these in this workshop. Okay.
Surely, ma'am. We are definitely on to it, and we will be also sharing the recording of all the guest speakers to other guest speakers. So it was really wonderful to have you today, and we also will like to request you if you can share some time on the valedictory function. So there, the students, our all the participants and the various groups, they will be sharing their work, although it is a very short span of time and we are like envisioning too much, but still whatever are the deliverables at the end of, so we will be sharing amongst us. So I would
Yeah,
again like to invite you for that Monday.
yeah, keep me posted about the time and the link. I'll surely be there. Yeah.
Sure, sure, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Okay, yeah, bye.
Bye, ma'am. So moving further, we have with us Aditi Deodhar. She is a software consultant having
Hello, ma'am.
passed a
Good morning.
graduation degree in industrial mathematics with computer application. Now this is where you wonder. She has completed her postgraduate diploma in sustainable management of natural resources and nature conservation from Ecological Society. She has founded a forum named Brown Leaf with the vision that not a single leaf should be burnt in India. She is active part of conceptualizing and implementing Jeevit Nadi activities like Muthai River Festival and river walks, etc. So, welcome, ma'am. Welcome to the
Thank you.
workshop of ecological eco restoration of riparian zones, and we would really like to hear from you.
Definitely. Thank you for making me part of this wonderful initiative. Uh, Hello, good morning, everybody. Uh, Today, I will be sharing some of our experiences working on the river Mula and Mutha in Pune city with aspect of community collaboration. So I'll just give a brief about what where I come from. We are a group of people. In 2014, we came together to do something something to improve conditions of rivers in Pune city. So we all were pained by the sight of these rivers, and we decided that we have to do something. And in 2016, this informal group became a Section 8 company called Jeevit Nadi Living River Foundation. So Jeevit Nadi stands for Living River. So that is our goal, that we wish to make these rivers once again living rivers in Pune city. And so in last 6 years, we have articulated various programs. First 3 years, we majorly work with the intent of awareness generation, because earlier on we realized that if we want to bring about any positive change in the state of the rivers, we have to involve the citizens. Rather, without citizen participation, no river can be rejuvenated. That was our conclusion, and with this intent, we crafted various awareness generation programs. And in 2017, we just carried out a small experiment in one of the public gardens in Pune city. Till then, our assumption was that we have to connect people to the river, because nobody really cares about rivers anymore in urban areas. That was our assumption, and because of this experiment, we got a pleasant shock, and that proved that our assumption was wrong. We just in that public garden, we just volunteers spread out, and we started talking to people, and we simply asked them what they feel or think about the rivers. And every 9 out of 10 people stopped and talked to us, and they were very eager to talk about the river. And a common question they had was what they can do to bring about a change in the current pathetic state of the rivers. And so that was eye opener for us, and we realized that it is not that people are indifferent. People are helpless, because when we look at the rivers in any urban landscape, there are so many problems and so many challenges are there, that as a common citizen, I really don't know what I can do for the river, or even where can I start. Actually, that is the major question. And doing anything alone, that thought itself is very scary. And so that was what was holding people back. And so when we realized that, we decided that we have to change that. And so there are many good intentions that exist in the community. So all we have to do is just collect those or bring together those good intentions which are right now idle, and solid and back it up with solid ecological knowledge, and convert those idle good intentions into concrete action towards river conservation. And so with this intent, we launch our first action oriented program. It is Adopt a River Stage. So it was launched in May 2017. So now all the projects under this program have completed 3 years, and they're going strong, I'm proud to say. So I will just tell you about this, what we did here. So currently we have 4 stretches of Mutha River and 2 stretches of Mula River under this program. And inspired by this idea, some people have adopted river stretches in other cities also. So today basically I will be talking about one particular stretch. That was our first adopted stretch. It is on Mutha River in Pune city. The area is called Vithalwadi. And as you can guess by the name, there is a Vitthal temple on the bank of the river. So that place has a lot of religious significance, and it is actually place of pilgrimage. And whatever challenges you can imagine in urban landscape, that are present at this stage. So this stage is sort of representative of all the urban or all the challenges a river faces in urban landscape. So we began here with just 3 people, and eventually the group grew, and so now we have around 35 to 40 regular volunteers working there every single Sunday. Only break we took was due to COVID lockdown. Otherwise, this every Sunday the activities have been happening here. And we started work, we also realized that along with the conservation work we were doing, or the cleanup we were doing, it is vital to change the perception towards the river. Because in last few years, the river and river bed has become a very convenient garbage dumping places. So whenever we think about the river bed, it is always that it is something very filthy, dirty, and something we should avoid. So that is the perception common person has about the river bed now. So along with the conservation activities we're doing, we also decided to arrange various events by the river, and so to bring people there. So one of them was, as you can see in the picture, it was storytelling session. And in the rock in the river bed, there was a session. Then it was on the river bank also, and the people on the bridge, people passing by, they were stopping and seeing exactly what we were doing. And that sight was really heartwarming, where so many kids were sitting along with their parents listening to the story, and that began changing the perception of the way people looked at the river. And so this is just a glimpse of the state. You can see the Pundalik temple in the right in the riverbed. This is the river. There is a beautiful basalt rock in the riverbed. And as you can see, the river no longer has its natural banks. The river is channelized all throughout its in the municipal corporation limit. Then there is one thing that as you can see in the picture, there is a gomuk. So it's actually live spring, and it flows in the river bed, and it used to drain into river at some point of time. But now a lot of interventions have happened in the river. Like we saw the river bank, river is channelized, so that concrete bank was constructed. Then sewage pipeline runs right in the riverbed parallel to the river channel. So all for these interventions, the basalt in that riverbed was blasted off, and all the remnants of that blasted rock were just left as it is in the riverbed. And over the years, whenever water was discharged from the dam, the silt that is carried by the water, it got accumulated in these rock remnants, and because of this, a lot of mounds are formed in the riverbed. So actually the topology of the riverbed has changed because of this. And because of these mounds, this water from this stream that should have reached the river no longer does. And there are two such streams in the riverbed, where they used to flow in the river. They used to feed fresh water to the river, but now they cannot reach the river, and instead of those flowing streams, they end up in series of stagnant pools right in the riverbed. So these are the gomuks. And what happens, as you can see here, this is one of the stagnant pools. So there are a lot of such stagnant pools are created in the riverbed because of this. And as you know, what happens is whenever water stagnates, there is anaerobic condition is created, and the result of anaerobic condition is methane and the foul smell. So river bed stinks. So you can feel that stench whenever you enter riverbed. Then because of stagnation, mosquito breeding is ensured. So a lot of mosquito breeding happens there, and a result of this is that people start dumping garbage in such pools, and the garbage attracts more garbage, and that's how that vicious cycle starts. Because of the stench and the garbage, the riverbed looks filthy, dirty, so people avoid it. And whenever people avoid this, then negative activities like garbage dumping and others start there. So this was the condition when we started. So there were these two streams which had ended in series of stagnant pools, and it was really filthy place filled with garbage. So we decided, this is just a glimpse of that garbage you can see here. So we decided that we have to do something about it. And there are many places we could spot in the riverbed. As you can see, the taro, typical marshy vegetable, where you see that is the those stagnant pool is present there. So typha, taro, polygonum is typical marshy vegetable, and you can see a lot of it. Lots of taro. At some places the taro was even taller than us. That was because a lot of nutrients that it was getting through the polluted water, so it was growing rampantly. So what we did is, I will just provide glimpse of this one, that you can see that there is Gomukh, and from that Gomukh, these four pools we identified. So that stream that once used to drain into river, now it had ended up in series of these four pools. So we identified these four pools, and then we realized if simply we connect these roots, if we dig a channel connecting one pool to the next, so that water will flow from one pool to the next, and that way we can take water to the river. So actually it was a very simple idea, and then we realized why not do it. Means, we at that time we did not know if it would work, but we realized let's carry out a pilot here. It is to a smaller of the two streams, so we decided why not carry pilot on this stream. So this is how our plan was, and that's how we began our work. Also, there is a sewage pipeline that runs parallel, and here these are some sewage chambers for maintenance purpose. So every 50 meter in the river bed, we find these sewage chambers. Sometimes these chambers leak, so there was some pollution with some sewage was getting mixed with fresh water. So only taking water to the river was not enough. We had to do some water treatment also. So we decided that let's try this out with soil and vegetation that is present in the river. So that's what we did. You can see the typha here. And so we began our work. So we consulted two organizations. One is ICOS for Ecological Services and Lemnion Green Solution. We wanted to validate our idea with the experts, and when they gave us go ahead, so with their inputs, we improved our plan, and we went about implementation. So what we did, we connected this pool one, pool two, pool three, and pool four. We simply dug a channel between these so that water could flow from one pool to the next. And this is how we went about it. So the project coordinator used to make this plan and used to share it on our WhatsApp group. So we used to simply list whatever task we wanted to achieve that Sunday. So we worked there every Sunday for 2 to 3 hours. And so this was the plan that was shared with everybody. And every morning, every Sunday morning, we used to simply gather there. We actually sort of, I would say, we followed agile methodology. So we used to have this 5 minute stand-up meetings in the riverbed. Then we used to, volunteers used to choose which work, because they already knew what work had to be done. So they used to choose which work they want to do, and they used to go about it. And this is how we did. So that digging the channel, it was quite challenging at places, because of this marshy place we could not get footing in that riverbed. So creating that channel was quite in pool one, as I mentioned, the taro and taifa was even taller than us. So it was actually quite challenging to get visibility of what lies next. But nonetheless, volunteers managed this. And we also took care that whatever fauna we find here, not to disturb that fauna. We also documented whatever fauna we found in these pools. And this is glimpse of the pool one, where I say it was most challenging of four pools. And it we no nobody had this experience or even practice of this hard work. So it was actually quite difficult putting in that hard work for 2 to 3 hours, and in these marshy conditions. And because of years and years of stagnation, this was the color of the water, and the mud around it was really black and murky water. And also, whenever we dug the channels and the pools, we had to do some bank stabilization interventions, and we achieved that through the rock remnants that were lying in the riverbed itself. So one principle we followed here is we did not introduce anything foreign in the riverbed. So whatever was already available, like these rock remnants and taro, taifa, this vegetation also, we simply relocated it. So it was just there here from other pools, we just replanted it here. But that was the strict rule we followed, that we introduced nothing foreign in the riverbed. Around 100 rocks were transported this way through human chain. And you can see this bank stabilization exercise going on, and that was the output. So it would have seemed impossible to transport around 100 rocks from one place to another, but because of this human chain and very enthusiastic volunteers, we could do it. And that was the result. The water, once it started flowing, that black murky water turned into this. And this was the first day when the first flow of water came from pool 1 into pool 2. This was the color. And then eventually the water started flowing, all that stagnant water that has stagnated for years. It when it went away, the fresh water took its place. And with this taro typha kena that we replanted here, the soil and plants help treat that water. And when we started our work here, after we have finished that Sunday's work, we had to go to the Gomukh to wash our hands, because a lot of water was available in the river bed, but it was stagnant for so many years and it was really dirty water. But that Sunday, when that first time that flow started from pool 1 into other pools, that was the first time we could get this fresh flowing water right in the river bed for us. And that was a nice feeling actually. And around 6 Sunday after we started our work, we got reciprocation of our work in a very unimagined manner. This is a group of youngsters that came there. They came on their bicycles and they parked their bicycles, and these kids just ran into riverbed, and then they really love these pools, and they were splashing water on each other from these pools. And this Dada that you see with them, he said that he takes these kids from his society every Sunday to some location on their cycles, bicycle. And he said we have passed this place many times before, but never these kids even wanted to visit the river or enter the river bed. But today they suddenly saw this flowing water, and the sound of that flowing water was so soothing that they simply spontaneously, rather, they just park their bikes outside and enter the riverbed. So that was a really nice reciprocation we got for the work we did. And again, the salient features are that everything was achieved through community collaboration. There was no paid worker or anything. All are these volunteers and who work together. And so good intentions coupled with sound ecological knowledge achieve this result. Just a glimpse of the wetland flora and wetland fauna that we found. Then, with this experience with us and with the successful execution, we decided that we will replicate this for other stream in the same stretch. And so we call it stream 2. So as you can see, that stream enters the riverbed as a waterfall. And so this is actually a unique feature. There is no waterfall in this riverbed anywhere, but this unique feature again was ignored because there's so many dirty pools were there that it was not possible even to reach this waterfall, and it was filled, as I say, with stagnant water and lot of garbage. And so this is the work we did here. The amount of water in this stream was more compared to that other spring, so a lot of bank stabilization and work we had to do. And some of this work was washed away in the next monsoon, so we had to do it. So that was also a learning that how we have to go with the flow and how we to study. So this is just a glimpse of all the work that we did, and this is the result. So now, as you can see, this treated water reaches the river 36 36 365 24/7. And so this actually stream is now feeding the river. It is because it is one of the feeder streams of the river, and also this is feeding treated fresh water to the river, and which is vital for the river, because as you know, rivers in Pune city are unfortunately among the 10 most polluted rivers in India. So the vital fresh water that the river needs, it is being fed with these two streams. And to think about it, actually, what did it take? Right? Just 20 Sundays, 50 plus volunteers, and 4 experts. So, as you can see, there is some core team, that is the consistent volunteers. Then there are some ad hoc volunteers, because many youngsters join this wetland development. Whenever we shared these photos on social media, it attracted many people, and then youngsters brought more of their friends with them. And because there was some action, there was some instant gratification through this exercise. So we received lot of ad hoc volunteers for this. So the core volunteers, then some ad hoc volunteers and subject experts, and a coordinator to ease the or facilitate communication between the team and the experts. So that was all needed actually. And agile methodology that we use is observe, learn, execute, assess, and course correction. And so with this, every Sunday we learned new things. We applied that learning in our next week's execution, and that's how we achieved the result. And why this model work? Because there is no hierarchy in the team. Because team coordinator is again one of the volunteers, and his or her role is only to facilitate communication between the team and the experts. And everybody has freedom to express their ideas. Everybody all the time had this bigger picture. So whenever they were carrying a rock or planting something, it was not that they're just simply carrying the rock. They were going to feed the river fresh water 24 by 7. So that was the bigger picture always was with us. And volunteers like that bigger picture, and that's why they wanted to be part of it. Also, if there was since there was no hierarchy, so if any task required more volunteers than we expected earlier, other volunteers would be happily fill in. And so there was complete ownership or belongingness. And everybody enjoyed working together actually. And so it provided all us energy to carry through our day-to-day life for an entire week. So that Sunday became source of energy for all of us. So actually, what we did on this two small streams at Vithalwadi, so such actually instances exist all throughout the city in the riverbed. So many such streams are there, which small streams which no longer feed the river or no longer reach the river, and they end up as series of stagnant pools in the riverbed. And a lot of stretches where we can see this picture, and that stench from that is really horrible, the mosquito breeding and the garbage it attracts. We see many situations. Also, there are many wetlands in the riverbed, and I will just provide you glimpse of how these wetlands are formed. So this is Google Earth image of the same stretch that I showed you earlier. It image is of 2005, and as you can see, there is no constructed channel. River is not channelized at that time. It has natural bank. And just observe this yellow highlighted part. Sorry. And here is the river in 2010, the same stretch. And now you can see the channelization has been done. And as you can see, there is a small meander of the river, and the channelization that has run, it has actually cut that meander. And because of this, there is a permanent wetland that has taken place. So where it was previous meander of the river, now the wetland exists. And you can see all throughout here that marshy places exist in the riverbed beside the river constructed river channel. And this is condition all throughout the river. So there are wetlands, and there are streams that have become stagnant pools. And all throughout this riverbed such conditions exist, and everywhere that is the situation, that this water has stagnated there. There is mosquito breeding, and there is lot of garbage that is dumped into this. And because of this, many times even the riverbed is not easily accessible, and where even if it is accessible, people just turn away from it because it stinks. It seems something very dirty and filthy place to be, so nobody actually goes there. And whenever people with good intentions turn away from the riverbed, their place is taken by some negative elements. And so we find lot of liquor bottles in the riverbed. Lot of garbage dumping, lot of construction debris dumping happens in the riverbed, and it's because there is no vigilance, because common people, common citizens don't go there. And so if you want to change this picture, then whatever we did at Vithalwadi, it can be replicated on other streams. And so once the water starts flowing, you can have that visual and nasal parameters where the water is clear, there is no stink, and water feeds the river. So a river also gets fresh water. It is deprived of except for the monsoon months. And the flowing water has that serene sound, and it attracts people with good intentions back to the river, as it was the case in the past. Then there is one more exercise we did actually in 1961, on 12 July 1961. One of the dams that provides water to Pune city, the dam at Panshet, it collapsed, and because of it, the other dam that it feeds into, it also collapsed. And that time only two dams were there. Now we have four dams supplying water to Pune city. At that time, the two dams were there, and both the dams collapsed. And the dams that would have supplied water to the Pune city all throughout the year, they emptied within a few hours on that single day. And so all the water that, for that year just actually flowed away. And the dam, one dam had to be reconstructed, and one dam had to be repaired. And for 3 years, then there was no single dam for Pune city. So we just wondered how the city survived these 3 years. And so as you can see, there was scarcity of water, but city did manage, and because there were alternate water sources. So what were the water sources? So dams were gone, but river itself was very clean. So people residing near the river bank could go to the river and fetch water. The feeder streams to the river, major and minor feeder streams, water in them was drinkable at that time, so people residing there could do that. Also, some of this water from some of the streams was diverted, and it was supplied to Pune city. There were lakes. No natural lake exists in Pune city. All these are human made lakes. The lakes were there, their water was still drinkable. Wells were there. Every single household at that time in Pune city had dug well. And it was one Peshwa era system was created on one of the major feeder streams to Mutha. And so these houses or tanks were there all over the city from where people could fetch water. That system was already 200 years old, but it was still working at that time. And so with these alternate resource water sources, even though there was scarcity, the city could manage or city could survive. And so we compared that situation 1961 with 2015. So 2015 was a drought year for Maharashtra. So all over India, monsoon was okay, average, but in Maharashtra it was below average, and almost none of the dams in Maharashtra were filled up to 100% of their capacity that monsoon. And same was for Pune city. We now have four dams, and none of all these dams were filled up to only 50% of their capacity. So it was really drought year for Maharashtra. And we just wondered what water sources we have. Because with we say that with advent of climate change, monsoon is going to get more erratic, so this 2015 can repeat. So we just wondered, let's say, map what are the alternate water resources. So if there is no monsoon, our dams is not going to be enough for us. So what we have now, so what sources existed was river, streams, lakes, wells, houses at that time. Now river, you have seen the condition of the river. It is, as I said, one of the most polluted rivers across India, and the dissolved oxygen in this river, except for 4 months of monsoon, it is between 0 to 2. So zero dissolved oxygen means this is a dead river, and so that is the condition for almost 8 months of the year. So river water is not drinkable. Same is, or even condition of the feeder streams is even worse than the river itself. A lot of garbage, lot of sewage is actually let in the rivers with untreated. So stream water is no longer an option. The lakes, all the three lakes were there that are polluted. Wells, now the dug wells do exist at some places, but when the new constructions happened at many places, the dug wells were just filled up. So dug wells have gone down, and the Peshwa era system no longer is functioning, because it in the all the when the city grew, the urbanization took place, all these tanks were destroyed. Even the underground channels through which water was brought into the city from that lake were destroyed. So this system no longer works. So all our dependence for our water is on the dams now. we have destroyed all other alternative sources. And so when we talk about financial investment, our future, we always hear the word diversification of portfolio. And in case of water, that is actually where is a vital factor for us. We are playing this gamble where there is no diversification of portfolio. All our dependence is solely on dams, and that was the situation that scared us. And we thought, okay, what future are we offering to our kids and next generation? So and when we wondered, what we did at Vittalwadi was that there are two streams. We actually made those streams flowing again. We treated the water, and it just took 2 hours on 20 Sundays for 50 people. And so it was not really very difficult to achieve. So if we put our willingness, if we put our capabilities at this, then actually we can utilize all these feeder streams, all these wetlands in the river bed, because similar wetlands exist in other rivers in Pune, like Mula and Ram river. And so if similar thing can be replicated there, then we can create both. We can have these alternate water sources for us, for the local communities, and also we change the image of the riverbed as something unhealthy and filthy. And so that's what I wanted to share with you today. And that's what I wish. Objective of the experience sharing is that this concept can go to many people, and wherever such conditions exist, it can be implemented. Yes,
Thank,
Sonal, that's
thank you very much, ma'am. Uh, you have,
Particularly,
yeah, you have shown how reach level restoration can happen, and clearly demarcated public participation goals and the way of action. So I request our participants, before we give you a comprehensive thank you, I request all the participants to share their questions.
yeah.
Yes. So, guys, anybody who has a question?
Hello, ma'am. Myself Sabrina.
Hello.
Hello. Actually, I loved your presentation. It's very inspiring, and I want to do also in my hometown if I get a chance. And I want to ask you that in most of the streams and lake or canal, we see that the municipal corporation drains channelize the drain to the river. In that case, how we can treat that and the fresh water goes to the river?
Yeah, actually, yeah, that is the challenge from I think all every city in India. That lot of untreated sewage is discharged in these streams and rivers. So for streams, I would say that first we have to check what is the proportion. So sometimes it is that the fresh water is also present in the stream and there is some sewage, and depending on that we have to plan our intervention, because the soil and plants can help to certain extent to purify the water, but the proportion has to be checked. And it's not enough for the citizens to do the work. We have to also approach the local governance, and they have to also work on stop preventing that source, or working on that source of that untreated sewage. So it has to go both ways. That one thing is, once it is in the riverbed or once it is approachable in the riverbed, we can do something and we can do some treatment using soil and all this thing. And the flowing water, whenever there is as you know, there is turbulence, the oxygen in the air gets mixed in the water, so the oxygen level increases, and whenever dissolved oxygen level increases, water has inherent capacity to treat some of the impurities. So we can actually take help of that. So first make that water flowing. If it has stagnated, then use soil and plants to treat that water. So this is what as citizens we can do. And along with that, there has to be equal pressure from the citizens on the local governance to top cause of that pollution also. Because one thing we realize that why river is not priority for the governance is because it is not priority for the citizens also. So as you know that if there is garbage that is thrown near your house, you will complain, you will immediately take some action, and to reach the local governance and get the problem sorted. But not no such feeling exists for the river, and that's why even for local governance river is the last priority, because nobody is going to complain, so there is no pressure on them to take some action. So along with this interventions I mentioned and the community collaboration efforts, the same pressure has to be built, so that group should act as a pressure group for the local governance also. So the local governance also knows that for these people their river is a priority, and then no longer can ignore that river. So it has to go both ways. So this, along with these interventions from community, there has to be equal pressure to stop that source of pollution also.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Anybody else?
So, thank you, ma'am. Thank you for being part of this workshop. And I would particularly like to, bring this to everybody's notice is, we in this entire workshop we have been looking at riparian edges. We've been looking at a large scale, from a large scale detailed projects to understanding river and its behavior and its flooding and the habitat and vegetation associated with it. And when all these theory is trying to shape up and take place, here comes your example, which actually tries to demonstrate things on ground, bypassing the entire system and doing a hands-on exercise and showing us the strength of what with logical understanding and with little catalyst, how it can be really executed at a ground level, and a workable solution. I mean, even at large scale projects, this is what we do. We try to interconnect water systems together. And in that process, it automatically cleans water, it automatically tends to, restore habitat, it tends to have good species diversity, and that's what is required. This also tells us how, matlab, it gives a very what do you say, it gives us the right it tells us that there is hope there. If there is hope, there is possibility that if every I mean, if every society, every person in the society, as well as if dovetailed with support from government, if dovetailed with techniques, we will be really be able to look at our rivers differently, and rivers will definitely add to our life. We can bring them back in our lives. So thank you very much, ma'am.
Thank you.
And once again, thank you. It was very wonderful.
Thanks.
Yeah, we are honored to have you on the forum and the workshop, ma'am. This forum actually belongs to the numerous water warriors who, just on hearing the name, and they connected us without any second thoughts and without any. On behalf of the Department of Landscape and my colleagues Richa, Anupama, and myself, and our entire department, we would like to thank you once again for joining us and sharing your valuable experience. Uh, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for making me part of this wonderful
Yeah.
initiative.
We would also like you to invite you for the valedictory program, and we hope to remain connected so we can
Absolutely.
have your guidance in future projects as well. So thank
Sure.
you once again.
Thank you.
This again, this bridge lecture, I'll be sharing some theoretical information on ways of assessing riparian landscapes, recreation design, some thumb rules, or where how can we go about, what does theory say about how recreational areas are to be identified, principles and concepts of ecological planning, developing river restoration goals, some insight into greenway planning and approaches of. We will also be seeing certain case studies of stream edges redesign. Okay, so first and foremost, how do we assess riparian landscape? So, as we have seen from numerous presentations, the riparian zone can be read from various scales: the regional, the segment, and the reach level. So, the toolkits for assessing in the three scales vary. So, for the regional scales, there are suitability methods and other different approaches which are very useful. For segment scale, the two projects that we discussed in the morning session, Ms. Prajakta Baste and Ms. Aditi Deodhar, the segment level studies can be done using rapid riparian assessment toolkits, etc. And then the reach level assessment can be done, which we saw more in Ms. Aditi Deodhar's project. Uh, Micro level investigations can be done at reach level. So for comprehensive planning needs to take care of this entire study, the regional, the segment, and the reach level. And the tools should be selected carefully based on the data available and these toolkits. Okay. So going into the history of what landscape-based assessments are, so there are great number of toolkits which are present in good number of toolkits that are present in landscape architecture, which can be useful. There are suitability methods, which there are questionnaires, there is ecological system approach, there are applied landscape ecological approaches. So there are good number of ways, and they have developed from 1800 onwards, and there are still there are newer version of these that are present. So these measurement of landscape values and perception, applied human ecological approaches, landscape suitability can be done. So some common approaches which we know them are Gestalt method or natural resource conservation method, physiogeographic unique methods, the Macargian methods of overlay analysis. So again, these are the help bring an understanding of the characteristics of the region. We are not going much into the detail, but we'll be just sharing one or two which are the most, which can be the most useful methods. Similarly, there are other ecological, an entire interpretation can be done from an ecological perspective. So how does the riverine interact and the species interact? Then there are metrics which can be useful for assessment. So this is the very popular layer cake model, which we which is commonly followed. So there is this human layers, understanding the community economics, demographics, land use, the biotic layer, the nature of mammals, birds, habitat, and abiotic layers. So this is a very popular Macargian or the layer cake model. Which is there. Then there are other methods or human ecological approaches which says that apart from these layers, solid physical layers, one also need to understand or take in human perception. So through with the help of questionnaires, with the help of other surveys, these can be done, and these are some important case studies which one can refer to for the same purpose. Again, then there are landscape ecology based approaches which are quite useful and very popular these days, which integrates understanding of habitat, patch, corridor, matrix, and other phenomena, which we'll be discussing briefly after this. So this is another way of assessment of landscape value by understanding the what the experts say or the common. So these are again set of questionnaires and perception-based studies which provide a framework for assessing these landscapes. So this is again a Macargian method of identification of areas most fit for recreation based on various parameters, and the areas most fit for urbanization. So an overlay of the suitability can let us know what is the degree of recreation a riparian can handle. So basically, when we talk of recreation, these water bodies provide two type of recreational activities. One is the passive, and the second are the active. So passive activities are generally reserved for areas with unique geographic features, high scenic water value, features of historical value, high quality forest, high quality marshes. These are more fragile as compared to other zones, while areas which require lot amount of human engagement can be called classified under active recreation. So the activities like swimming or paragliding or other form of recreational activities, camping, etc., can can come under passive and active. So based on the degradation or the fragility, one can decipher on uh, what type of recreational activity is most suitable in that particular zone. So again, a number of principles such as people, money, time, communication, accessibility, again are a determinant, very play an important role and hence should be taken care of. So, a detailed understanding of the site management and what is the social or the physiological, psychological demands of the stakeholders, one needs to plan these recreational activities so that they are acceptable to the stakeholders, all the stakeholders. So within the recreational area also, there is this wonderful study by Land for the Future. We have come up, there are various classes, areas which can be intensively developed, where extensively developed for general outdoor recreation, with in natural areas with little or no development, and then there are areas which are fit for passive recreational values such as outstanding natural area or those with primitive quality or natural archaeological heritage, and thirdly areas with high historical or cultural values. Okay. So we have these standards and statistics which allow us to calculate the carrying capacity of the total number of population open space can handle. So ideally, these can be utilized in determining what would be the total users. So based on the population, the area fit for development and other things, the view shed, so the availability of a large view shed, which is helps in determining the areas for recreation. And again, the nature of recreational activities can be studied also in long term. For who are these people? Who are the wildlife enthusiasts, the sports person, the daily use participants, the campers, the winter sports, the so a detailed study and understanding of their behavior can help in designing these spaces better. So this is how one goes about developing a recreational program. So once we identify the area suitable for either passive recreational suitability or active recreational suitability, and what is one can calculate the total amount of carrying capacity it can handle, and then what are the like what the program can be developed in tandem to the social and psychological needs of the stakeholders. So the next step is how does one go about ahead um, in ecologically restoring or planning of these river basins. So the Foreman and Godron on riparian ecology, they talk about using a set of terms which I'll be explaining later. Uh, then they talk about the need of rich landscape heterogeneity, uh, increasing of green patches, etc. So where patches are areas. So this is one handout that I'll be emailing you today as well. It talks on how does one read a geospatial image on. So these are areas which are called as patches. So we can have patch of a grassland or a forest. The area at the vicinity is called as the edge of it. So when one divides the passage, it leads to, so the inside area is called as the core area. So the bigger the core area, the more is the number of species. So if it gets segmented, it leads to the total size gets reduced. So there are certain ecological principle which says ki connection, which talks about how large landscape patches are more useful than other, and how stepping stones can be used in case like these smaller patches in a matrix are useful uh, in compensating the loss of large patches. So this is how corridor develop, and corridor are areas with of linear uh, typology which connect large patches. So fluvial regions can be considered as some corridor regions. Okay, so the 5 principles for ecological design, as shared by most of the researchers, are first is the solutions grow from place. So one needs to understand the local behavior of the water body and the how people have responded traditionally to derive with a more logical contemporary solution. Second principle is ecological accounting informs design. So lesser we get things from outside, or lesser the footprint, better is the design. Third principle says designing with nature, which means understanding the patterns of our site and creating a tandem with that. And fourth principle says incorporating everybody as a stakeholder and make it participatory in the design process. So we cannot just be on the giver end and start dictating that this is the proposal. And in case of any, there is conflict of interest, the fifth principle helps. So make nature the principle. So whichever is the most logical, ecological solution as compared to the other can be taken ahead. So, when we talk of river restoration, the objectives of river restorations can be uh, numerous, and some of them can be water quality improvement, water flow improvement, enhancement of aquatic biodiversity, flood management, handling climate change concerns, hydromorphological restoration, biodiversity enhancement. So, one can keep uh, these uh, three domains of restoration, so natural, ecological and cultural. So ecological can comprise of the flood regulation, carbon sequestration, biodiversity enhancement, and connecting the river banks laterally and longitudinally. So these are the multiple proposals or strategies which address these multiple number for geomorphologically or ecological restoration of the river basin, for cultural integration of the river basin, and economic revitalization can be are can be helpful in developing restoration goals or objectives. So, So when we look into river restoration projects around the world, so they tell us the first 3 steps, or the most important 3 steps for planning any effective river restoration strategy is we need to create goals. What are the geomorphological goals, hydrological and ecological restoration requirements for the river basin, the segment or the reach. So like in the previous presentation, Aditi had such wonderfully explained how they could decipher a lost meandering course, and with the help of the Google images, and they tried to restore it, or the lost connection of the feeder was revitalized. So one needs to, after all the study and the degradation assessment one has done, we need to establish what should be the goal, because not all rivers are same, not all sandbars are same, or not the patterns are same. So my river in the natural state can flow like this. So these goals need to be established after these studies. Then what are the socioeconomic identification of socioeconomic constraints and opportunity? And thirdly is to define clear goals, scales for recovery and respond to. So like this, maybe geomorphological restoration can take a span of 5 years or 7 years or 8 years. So the one also needs to identify the time scales of different. So maybe a entire project can be envisioned after 30 years or 50 years. It comes when all the subsidiary goals have been achieved, then the entire river restoration can appear how it was planned. So these three are very necessary. As we are also dealing with our own assessments, so we can now create goals for uh, or objectives for restoration. Yeah. So this is again a proper restoration or ecological restoration should aim at allowing lateral river movement. Lateral river movements, which means banks and the river basin, river. So it should allow non-hindered connectivity of the tributaries to the river and the banks to the river. So we can plan for lateral river movement, lateral river connectivity, longitudinal connectivity, and in channel riparian restoration. So allowing lot of islands, deadwood, detritus, conserving the sandbars, point bars, etc. So again, these different set of objectives can be planned or measures can be taken for each of these four objectives. Okay, so we can just read through this. This is just summarizing what we have right now said. So, after we talk about this, there is another theory called as greenway or green infrastructure development, which looks or takes care of this. So we will now see into these case studies. So there is this theory of green infrastructure development, which can take care of human and ecological needs in consideration. So, the ecosystem health is defined as basically a good health of the socioeconomic values, community values, physical uh, and psychological values. So, green infrastructure can be developed is a good approach that is taken hand in hand while designing such river restoration goals. So what we have looked now, we can connect corridors and patches. So this strategy can be applied at large levels. So when we are taking regional level interventions or regional level studies, uh, so the patches can be made of habitat reserves, national parks, habitat constructed wetlands, biodetention, green roofs, biospheres, etc. And the corridors can comprise of ecological corridors, streams, rivers, bioswales, greenways, bike pedestrian paths, or utility infrastructure. So this is one very simple way of like integrating ecological goals to. So the theory of green infrastructure greatly helps in achieving river restoration goals. So ultimately, we get diverse benefits from this development of green infrastructure. So, in some of the concepts are like what we have just now saw by integration or connection of core and patches.
one can create these green infrastructure networks. So the corridor, as just now we saw, can comprise of bikeways, trailways, green corridors, hydrological paths, and cores are areas. So when this entire patch becomes more stronger and more efficient than a segmented one. Okay, so these are some of the example how it can be achieved. So corridors can be restored by replanting areas between patches, and we can, in case of absence of corridors, stepping stones can be utilized to at closer proximity, which allow movement of species. So these are some examples. So like in this example, there are three green patches which are isolated. So an alternative way of detailing could be connecting this water body with a connected ecological patch. And these are some examples. So greenway strategies are now being adopted by a number of countries, and they have policies. So when we want to integrate river restoration with the open space goals of a region or a city, this can be highly beneficial. So this is another example which of or case studies in which the patches and corridors play different social cultural roles. So somewhere they are used for bird watching or hiking, trail, etc. And while they are at the same time, they have an ecological function of cleaning the river, protecting the river basin, protecting the flows, etc. So these are good number of examples. So again, this is another example of a city which disconnects the larger green corridors, and how it can be through open spaces or park space network, it can be connected back. So these are some projects across the world in which demonstrate green infrastructure development. So this is another example of riparian restoration in which smaller stream corridors are connected to the lower reaches. So on the right is a bio detention pond. So this allows water percolation. At the same time, it is highly vegetated, so it has enhanced biodiversity. It has enhanced ability of carbon sequestration, etc. So, yeah, proposals like these, uh, larger connectivity, and then one can, so all the type of open spaces, institutional, social, cemeteries, wetlands, they can be connected together. So as we find in almost all the cities, there is this paucity of open space or public open space. So these green infrastructure projects, their implementation strategy helps us find out ways how this can be done at a larger scale. Yeah, so we have these standards which are already existing, so it can be justified and integrated with the larger ecological network. So these are some other part or patches of ecological patches. So this is a wildlife corridor which is connecting two patches and allowing the wildlife to pass using a bridge. The second is another example of a greenway as a productive landscape, which is used in another case study. So the citizens can take part in using the uh, productive values of that urban patch. So then there are number of methods such as stormwater retention ponds, detention ponds, which can be integrated to augment the water quality within this network. So this is an example of a bioretention swale which is planted, and it also allows percolation of excess water and infiltration of excess water. So there are these newer technologies that are available and can answer areas with of better ecological effectiveness. So greenways or pedestrian bikeways trails can be integrated along this network. So it can be more socially, culturally acceptable, and it the both the networks, they strengthen each other.
Again, this is an integrated stormwater drainage system wherein we have these rain gardens or bioretention swales which percolate all the extra excess water which is falling into the drainage pathways. This is another example of bioretention swale which can be integrated with road networks, and they absorb. So at least this solution allows the water which ultimately reaches the river to be of higher, better, cleaner, and so ultimately the concentration of pollutants is highly reduced with the help of such type of detailing. This is an example of a retention basin pond, which again allows the water to oxidize and enhances the self-cleaning capacity and also allows the water to infiltrate. So again, two examples. These type of detailing can be integrated along with our driveways, roadways, and in the paucity of space where we do not have riparian buffer or we have lost the entire stream network or smaller order streams. Such type of detailing can be quite helpful in reducing and cleaning the water. So this is a bioretention basin. So yeah. Then constructed wetlands are other techniques that allow sewage water to pause, allow the plants to absorb it, and there is this effort which is made to aerate the water so that more of oxygen is absorbed and more the pollutants are sequestered by plants, and ultimately the water discharged from these constructed wetlands is of higher, is of quite clean. So association, creation of wetlands, intermediate wetlands are very helpful in cleaning of water basins. This is an example of dynamic representation of a same river in two different time of the year. Okay, so now we move on to the last section. So the various type of riparian sections that one sees in the city, and what are the case studies, what do case studies inspire us, how have designers globally dealt with them. So I'll be quickly summarizing. So this is a review, basically this is a review. So the five type of edges have been taken for considerations. There are sometimes we find, so this is basically from a German study, adopted this from a German study where many landscape architects, environmental planners have come up and they have summarized the different types of edges and the possible detailings within them. So there can be commonly five scenarios: presence of embankment walls and promenades. Second is there is little bit of flooding provision. Third is presence of flood areas. Fourth is redesigning riverbeds, and fifth is having heterogeneous riverine elements. Okay, so these will just be sharing, browsing quickly. I'll I'll be emailing you this document as well today. So this is an embankment type of wall wherein people can move to the last level, but during the flood, there is a provision by which, with the help of staircase, people can access the river. So these are again embankment type strategy or measure adopted. So these are not the best. These are only intermediate like, since, or how do we redraw or how do we recreate better riparian edges. These are just design solutions for that. But this certainly only talks of recreational areas. So once the areas which have been identified or are inevitable for development, then they can be detailed in these multiple manners. So then there are certain projects which allow ramp walks, so one can access through them. So where the cities are located at high citadels uh, next to the river bank. So these are three approaches how a riverine edge can be maneuvered so that people during the lean times when the water flow is the minimum, it can be accessed. Then there are other detailings like this, in which glass barriers and walls have been used. So even though the cities are developed quite close, but it does not visually hinder. So there is presence of a glass barrier which is not visible, but it allows people to be connected to the river bank. Floating bridges, decks, suspended pathways, balconies, overhangs can are some other techniques, but again they are in like present. These are only to be recommended in areas of very high urban density, where still one wants to have a neat edge. The stepping stones, underwater steps. The underwater steps are very common in Indian scenario. So we have this lovely detailing or template of ghat development across each city of India, whichever is meeting the riverbank. So, so I'll be just moving through these. Then the construction of embankment walls, uh, using of submersive planting, which can clean it and which can be areas or parklands which can soak in water and are not damaged much. Then, with the help of floating jetties, floating islands. Then, dikes are massive structures which are used to protect the upland areas for walls from floods. So, there is countries like Japan and Norway or Denmark have huge dikes, landscapes across them, which protect them. Like Denmark is almost built underneath the sea. So the dikes are so well designed that they protect the seawater coming inside the city. So these are massive landscape elements which protect it, and then there can be dike parks or pathways or trails which can be designed over them. These are some example of dike sections, how dikes can be designed such that they become landscape spaces while at the same other time they have a functional value. So these are all smart detailing which one allows to connect the water in scenarios, and it does not. So as we have already in all the urban areas or the riparians have been highly reclaimed in Indian scenario or globally. This is a common phenomena. So some cities have started in Europe and other countries. They have started in Singapore. They have started rethinking about restoring and make how can they revive the lives of the river. The glass walls can be as barriers. So yeah. Then this last section talks of strategies which are available of how the channel can be broken up and allowing the river to flow on its own. So presence of one these channel can be re-deepened and recreated and meanders, and presence of riverine islands can highly be useful for restoring the riverine values. So these are certain examples and how it can be done. So presence of secondary channels or creating of branches, using or removing of the dikes or the embankments and allowing the water to flow in its natural sinuosity can be of the best help. Then alternatively, branching of river also allow it to aerate more and gather more of oxygen. Then having flood channels in between and allowing water to percolate or stop it. So are a good number of strategies for riverine restoration. So these are also talking of the same thing. So series of retention ponds, detention ponds. So whatever water is getting fed to the river basin can be cleaned up using this natural sedimentation technique. So water from one goes to the other and the sediments are collected. So ultimately there is cleaner water. Then there can be design of bypass culverts. So any architecture that can needs to come up can respond in terms of not allowing to change by respecting the ground water flows and not altering the geomorphology. So suspended structures can come up or floating houses. These can be designed next to the basin. So these are the numerous ways in which river edges can be enjoyed or uh, as shared by so many people. And then there can be park spaces which can be designed on the flat plains, which allow submergence, but then they can be used at other times of the year. So, certain places where identified with higher recreational value or permissible high recreational suitability can be used for camping and other waterside activities. Yeah. So lastly, we will be talking about in-stream water features that can be helpful in restoring the river channel. So there are these J bars of point bars. So water has an erosive action. So presence of elements like this can take the impact of the water over them and allow the bank to be stable. And then there are deflectors or in-stream deadwood or detritus that can help preserve the river bank from further erosion. So it can take the stream velocity. So measures or interventions are highly useful for riverine ecology and ecosystem. So these are the number of ways which can look aesthetic as well as they are helpful for restoring the river bank. Then riverbed sills, they actually help in deflecting the flow of the water and allowing it to again oxidize more and aerate more. So then there are other strategies like widening the channel in between or extending the flow length. So within the same channel, one the artificially these banks are developed so that it gets a larger course to gets a larger course to flow. So these are the good numbers. The creating of scour holes in between or placing of deadwood litter or creating these type of beaches.
Then connecting fish passes. So these fish passes, they connect two adjacent water bodies which are divided by some type of a dam system. So it allows species to move from one place to the other. And then deflecting the flow or designing the flow somewhere, creating a barrier so that water radiates, and then one can have multiple effects, and also it is useful ecologically for the riverine system. So these are all in-stream measures that can be adopted for river basins. So another strategy is to remove the channel, remove the sediments, and the allowing the settlement of deadwood detritus for then controlling water extraction, adding bed load, introducing disruptive elements, reprofiling the channel section, creating number of terraces, creating meanders, creating multiple channels, incorporating a stated channel. So these strategies are uh, very useful in reviving the riverine ecosystem. Yeah. So that is it. Thank you. So this is an encyclopedia of details which is compiled by a set of German scientists, designers on for their own country of which strategies that really helps us in understanding and typologically creating or dealing with such type of situations. So I would request if there are any questions you can share.
Has something similar been done for India or any region in the country? Any such documentation?
So we have to make it. Yeah, we have collected here. So we have identified the research gap, and that this could be the future course of action. We have so many teachers and the researchers over here. So yes, we need to typographically classify our river edges into and identify for each stream's order what could be the possible suitable detailing.
Um, yeah, I think, ma'am, what you're saying is absolutely true. There's a need for compiling this for India,
Yeah.
and many a times we just mimic the Western world, which they are good, no doubt, but we need to do it for ourselves also, the same work,
Yes.
for appropriate for our region, which cannot be copied from other sides. So there is a surely a need for that, which uh, I think you have told it very well.
Yeah.
One more thing, ma'am. I mean, I am from urban design, but more and more I have a feeling that landscape, urban design, conservation, they have to merge in our way of thinking. And working in silos does not do justice to these projects, especially when you are showing the urban infrastructure of open spaces. There's so much science in it, which sometimes I think urban design overlooks. And similarly, when we are planning the open spaces,
Hmm.
when we are looking at build forms, both the sides have to merge to make justice to the project. Like I think when I don't remember, one of the experts said that we have to look what the project needs rather than seeing what expertise we have to do justice to the project. And I think there should be more interaction or joint work done between these different streams of landscape, urban design, conservation, or whatever, I mean, courses we are running. And I think only then I think the project gets a holistic uh, problem solving approach. Because I know how we were taught and how the projects we addressed as urban designers, and more and more I'm learning about conservation, landscape, environment science, environment management, and I think all have to be integrated to make justice to the project. When you were talking, that kept coming, so I thought I share my thoughts.
Yes, ma'am. Definitely, we need to create, and this is we need to create a dialogue, and we need to interact more and more. And for such projects, we need to create interdisciplinary team. So we should emphasize on incorporation of, and I think then the work will be done in a more joyous manner as well. So one not only gets the work done at the end of the day, but becomes more happy and has less work to do as so yeah, we need to figure out how this can happen in future. So one needs to be more sharing and definitely. And while we look into there is this document, National Water Policy, which gets released every few years. So here our focus is not at all in when we read that document, it tells us how the entire emphasis is on water body is for hydropower generation. So entire money gets funded out how one can create more dams and create more electricity, or one can supply more water to the farmers. So we have taken the entire debate nationally in a very incorrect manner, which with the help of our own fraternity we can recreate this dialogue and re-demonstrate through good number of projects, and there by sharing the outcomes we can retell others the new way of doing things.
Ma'am, one more thing. There was this forum of environment statistics which is published by Statistic Department. I recently saw a publication, I mean a presentation by the person who works from there. It's published by the government, which I thought was would add a justification, because they literally, like you had mentioned in the GIS tools, where you see the changes in our ecological resources through GIS over time. So we can actually quantify the changes. So they are publishing it for India as a statistical report. So I think these things also we should put in our studios to show the importance of what's changing in our environment and how much action is required, because every 5 years in every city, the amount of water bodies disappearing, the amount of greenery that is disappearing is alarming. And when we support it with statistics, I think the many of the solutions that you are discussing in this workshop become very crucial for most of us. So I think we could maybe use these resources for India which are available with us.
Yes, ma'am. Actually, that is yeah, very useful information, and I think that is a very good resource also. So in ArcGIS, people have started pooling up their shape files, and many universities also allow it. So we also need to create an database or be more approachable for yeah. Thank you for sharing this very valid point. I think we also need to identify some ways where we can achieve this target and be more open. Because as department, we also have handled good number of projects, but after the semester or the duration ends, those remain confined in some hard drives or some folder, or there is some patchwork in the different
Yeah. Ma'am, in
stakeholders.
fact, I was just thinking like they have done repository for PhD thesis, where the author, the college, everyone is acknowledged, and it is a government portal where no one can debate over its authenticity. Similarly, for college works, if there could have been a portal where the institutes deposit with the authorship and copyright with the institute, uh, something like that could be worked out, where the copyright and the author is validated, or is acknowledged, and
Yes,
we could put it as a reference, like a research paper. We could cite it when we quote the reference.
yeah, ma'am. I think there is one portal called as Shodh Ganga, which already does it. So Shodh Ganga
Yeah,
is
that's for PhDs, and I think recently she opened it for masters.
yes,
But
yeah,
yeah, Shodhganga, my own PhD is there in Shodhganga, so yeah.
okay.
And I do refer it regularly because a lot of good work is there. So similarly, I think we should have our college works, studio works also published in a legitimate platform.
Yes, ma'am. Definitely, we are also planning to do it. So that is a nice suggestion. We'll definitely work towards that.